I want to add my welcome to Eric Kasischke, who heads up the implementation of NASA's Arctic Boreal Vulnerability Experiment, or ABoVE. In that role, he develops the partnerships with other organizations interested in collaborating in Alaska and Canada on the responses of terrestrial and freshwater ecosystems and societal responses to environmental change in the above study domain, which we'll hear a bit more about in a moment. IOPIC has been tracking the above experiment since Diane Wickland brought it to our attention, just as we were developing our own IOPIC plans under the kind of revised IOPIC efforts. So I'm very pleased to hear about ABoVE. Well, that ABoVE is now in its implementation phase. Prior to this assignment, Dr. Kasischke worked at the University of Maryland, focused on the impacts of fire on boreal forests and peatlands. So please, Eric, over to you.
Thank you, Simon. NASA's Terrestrial Ecology Program is a basic research program within the Earth Sciences Division of NASA. It is part of a larger carbon cycle and ecosystems focus area that has other research focuses as well. Our programs provide extramural funding to PIs at universities, NASA research centers, other federal agencies, private companies, NGOs, et cetera. So we have a fairly broadly based research activity that we sponsor. And the Terrestrial Ecology Program conducts field campaigns where we do concentrated funding focused on specific regions or topic areas, and so ABoVE is the fourth in line after a series of field campaigns listed here that began in the late 1980s. ABoVE is going to be focused on environmental change in Arctic and boreal regions of Western North America and the implications of these change for both ecological systems and society. So we have an overarching science question that you can read here that's focused on vulnerability and resilience of ecosystems and society to change. And then our overarching science objective focuses on understanding the underlying processes and their interactions that are controlling these changes. As we all know from in this group that there are unique ongoing changes to Arctic and boreal systems that are of particular interest in this region, including changes to permafrost conditions and thermokarst, variations in disturbance regimes and how ecosystems are responding to those regimes, as well as satellite observations of vegetation, greenness, and browning that have occurred over the past 40 years are some of the areas that represent key environmental changes. ABoVE is also very interested in understanding how these changes are going to affect the ecosystem services that people depend upon in this region. So here we have a couple of examples of changes to wildlife habitat is certainly a key research interest, as well as changes or impacts on infrastructure. At global scales, one of the key areas for research for ABoVE is understanding how changes in this region feed back to the climate. In particular, basically the feedbacks from soil carbon pools that are in permafrost and peatlands. We decided from the very beginning of the design for ABoVE that we would look at the research area as an integrated social ecological system, so that we consider research from the beginning on the impacts of changes to ecosystems on ecosystem services and their societal impacts. So this looks at it from a standpoint as a continuous system, not a linear system. We have 6 major thematic areas for focusing our research that include disturbance, permafrost, hydrology, flora, fauna, society, and carbon biogeochemistry. And based on those 6 themes, we have a science question associated with each one. I just should let people know I'm going through these slides rather quickly, but you can get copies of them at the very end of this presentation. I have a link to a website that provides linkages to the concise experiment plan for ABoVE, where you can read about the experiment plan in detail that goes over each of these questions and objectives. We have 2 sets of objectives, one focused on ecosystem dynamics and another focused on societal impacts. The ecosystem dynamics objectives are designed to be able to look at questions in an integrated fashion in terms of the processes that are driving change. And then our ecosystem services objectives are looking at focusing on the impacts of those changes to ecosystems on society. So one of the things we've done in our ecosystem services objectives, because there are a variety of impacts that are occurring on society and we can't address them all, we've set a priority of the top 6 areas that we want to focus on with our research. We've designed an experiment plan that looks at a broad region that has both a core region, which is in red, outlined in red here, and then a extended region that is in purple. Really the 15 areas or research areas denoted by flags in this area, these are the center of the areas, were identified to provide opportunities to study the major ecosystems common to the region and to look at how processes vary under different permafrost conditions and disturbance regime. Our experiment design was also based upon building upon existing research infrastructure and ongoing and planned research in these areas and opportunities for partnerships with other agencies and organizations who are already conducting research in this area or planning to carry out research in this area. So for example, I'll talk about this a little bit later on. We've been in contact with colleagues in the Canadian government in an organization called the Canadian High Arctic Research Station, who are planning in the process of funding major studies, long-term studies in Western Canada, Arctic regions. So we're forming a partnership with them in order to be able to leverage both of our research activities to address common goals and objectives. This will be a fairly typical NASA field campaign, where in essence what we're going to be looking at is integrating field-based observations within specific research areas and then doing overflights of these areas with satellite and spaceborne or satellite and airborne remote sensing instrumentation, and then basically using this integrated information as a basis for improving terrestrial biosphere and societal models. Our approach for implementation in a nutshell here is we're looking at our first solicitation for research proposals for ABoVE was released last December in ROSES 2014. ROSES is the omnibus solicitation released by NASA every year. It stands for Research Opportunities in Space and Earth Sciences. So this is a research announcement that's released every year. The proposals for this first solicitation are due a week from this Friday, 20 March. We plan to make our selections for our first round of funded projects in late summer 2015. I forgot to mention here that our initial set of projects, we've identified around $4 million per year to fund those. We plan to have the first meeting of our science team in late September of this year to start developing an implementation plan. We expect the program to ramp up with our investment reaching about $8 million a year in about 3 years from now. We're planning a major field campaign, our airborne campaign, to begin in years 2 or 3, probably 2017, summer of, followed by a second campaign 2 years later. And then we'll have analysis and synthesis activities following our field campaign. We expect the field campaign itself to probably last on the order of 5 to 6 years of intensive field studies. Ongoing activities, I'd like to just bring you up to speed on these a little bit of where we're at right now. We have a number of pre-ABoVE development projects going on where we're looking at developing key data sets that will be used during ABoVE. You can read about this at the web page identified here. There's 5 projects going on right now. NASA decided to fund a rapid response project that focuses on the impacts of the 2014 fires in the Northwest Territories. We decided to do this because we recognize that in order to understand the impacts of the fires, we needed to get in this summer, and therefore a proposal that was not funded until the end of the summer would not be able to do this. So somebody submitted a proposal to us for this, and we decided to fund it. What I'd like to talk about a little bit more in the rest of my talk is development and evaluation of the ABoVE Science Cloud, acquisition of NGA data products, development of partnerships, and planning for the ABoVE Science team. So as one of the activities that NASA has ongoing right now is that we're developing a science cloud facility at the Goddard Space Flight Center using a capacity that they're working on developing for storage and processing of large data volumes in computing environment so that it provides for analysis of data in a timely and efficient fashion. And it's really sort of beyond what an individual investigator can typically do on their own workstation environment. It's going to provide a shared set of computational resources for the ABoVE Science team. It's going to provide access to large data sets that are relevant to our goals. It will provide tailored computational resources to meet the needs of individual projects. And it will provide a unique environment for collaborations between scientists working on the project. So to give you an idea of some of the capacity of this system, as part of our pre-ABoVE projects, we're already downloading into the Science Cloud the entire Landsat data record from Thematic Mapper onward for the ABoVE domain. So rather than individual investigators having to go and create their own Landsat data sets for their specific projects, they will be able to use this data set that's being created. And we envision creating a number of similar data sets that will be available on the cloud. To give you an idea of the computational efficiencies, this allows you to actually process these large data sets in a very efficient manner. So for example, we had one investigator who was working off his workstation environment, and he's fairly good at this, and it was taking him probably 3 months in order to process an entire year's worth of Landsat data for the study domain, just because of input-output issues and storage issues. In the Science Cloud, he can do the same amount of work in about a week. And so it really provides a very efficient environment to work on. Another project that we're working on right now is the obtaining of a high-resolution commercial satellite imagery data set for ABoVE in association with the National Geospatial Agency. So what we're doing is basically we're obtaining all existing imagery for Alaska and the Arctic north of 60 degrees north in the study domain is already being obtained, and we're going to get copies of that. We are going to have the ability to do some direct tasking for additional collection of data within our domain over the next 2 to 3 years. This data will be transferred to the ABoVE Science Cloud, and then the Polar Geospatial Institute at our center at University of Minnesota is creating a 5-meter panchromatic orthorectified mosaic for our entire domain, and then they're going to create a first-pass digital elevation model for the entire study domain. So we're obtaining this data set that then can be used by members of the ABoVE science team, and it will be available to any federal agency personnel working on this. There will be some restrictions for sharing the data, directly sharing the data with foreign participants, but we're working on those data sharing arrangements. One of the design parameters for developing the ABoVE concise experiment plan is basically taking advantage of the considerable amount of ongoing research activities in the ABoVE study domain. So as I mentioned earlier, our investigator sites and activities in Canada will heavily be influenced by our investments and decisions by our Canadian partners. In addition to CHARS, we're also having conversations with the Canadian Forest Service, Canadian Centre for Remote Sensing and Environment Canada. We're looking to actually develop strong partnerships to address societal issues on the impacts of change with many different land management agencies in Alaska. So we've already had, and Canada as well, we've already had conversations with a number of agencies about this. And then we're also talking to other people who are involved in modeling activities, in particular DOE's NG experiment, NG Arctic, it should say here, that you heard about a few weeks ago. So we're actually, I was on the phone today talking to Mike Cooperberg and colleagues at Department of Energy about developing a partnership with DOE that involves utilization with NG and actually the ARM program as well. So we have a lot of opportunities for partnerships that we're pursuing right now. We're actually looking at a variety of different types of partnerships. So we're thinking about partnerships focused on scientific research in terms of field data, remote sensing, modeling, and decision support. We're also talking to people about partnerships that are focused on providing research support and logistics, especially these are things that some of the territorial governments in both the Yukon, Nunavut, and the Northwest Territories will be able to help us logistically get into some of these remote sites and help our researchers that way. And we're also looking at what we call affiliations, meaning that if there are organizations or individuals who want to be participating in ABoVE, we'll be able to offer them an affiliated membership on our team that will allow them to participate in a variety of activities that are part of ABoVE. So here's where we're at in terms of discussing partnerships. Like I mentioned, there are a number of U.S. and Canadian agencies where we're at the stage where we're actually talking about mechanisms to develop formal partnership agreements. We have ongoing discussions with a number of different agencies who have expressed identifying ways for collaborations, but we really need to do further discussions with them. But we feel comfortable that something's going to evolve in these with these different agencies, and then we have agencies that we still need to contact and continue our discussions with. So one of the ways in which ABoVE is going to be implemented is that anybody who is funded by NASA to carry out research for ABoVE has to agree to participate fully in the ABoVE science team. And our ABoVE science team will also be open to researchers who are involved on activities within the study domain from our partnering organizations, which I'll talk about in a second. So basically what a science team membership means is that you will fully participate in all science team meetings and activities. You'll have full access to the resources available through the ABoVE Science Cloud. You are going to assist in the development of the ABoVE Science Implementation Plan. You'll be required to coordinate with the project office regarding field activity so that field activities and logistical support can be coordinated. We expect people to coordinate their research with other science team members. They'll assist in the development of an implementation of data standards. They'll be engaged in training and knowledge transfer activities. And we expect our science team members to engage in activities to communicate with key stakeholders regarding the results from ABoVE, particularly with local and regional community organizations. So who's going to be on the ABoVE science team? Like I say, all investigators funded by NASA, and this includes the PIs, the co-Is, the collaborators, postdocs, graduate students from NASA-funded project. And this will include the terrestrial ecology projects funded specifically for ABoVE, as well as other ABoVE relevant projects that are ongoing at NASA, funded by other mechanisms. The science team is going to be open from investigators from our partner collaborated funded projects. And like I said, we are going to open it up to affiliate members who are investigators of any ongoing project in the ABoVE study domain that are addressing Tier 2 science questions and objectives, where they agree to fully participate as a science team member, including sharing of data and results. And also, it means that participation in ABoVE science team activities is approved by the sponsors of the research. So this is a sort of a policy that's evolved in other coordinated U.S. programs. For example, the North American Carbon Program has a similar policy that we're going to follow here. And I think that's the end of my presentation here. That's where we're at right now. We have a lot of activities ongoing. I'd be glad to answer any questions here, and here is the location for our concise experiment plan. Okay, Sarah, I'm done.
Sorry, Eric, I needed to unmute myself there. Thank you very much for a great presentation. We are having a little bit of trouble with the audio function here today, so I would ask people who have questions for Eric to go ahead and type them into your Q&A questions at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. That will go out to everybody. If you would like to speak, please go ahead and try to speak, but you may be on mute, and you may need to send me a note asking for us to unmute you. Hopefully that will work, and we'll look forward to some questions from some people now.
Eric, I do have one question from Allison York. Will there be additional solicitation?
Yes, I should have mentioned
year
that.
2 and following?
What we expect to do is have our next solicitation in ROSES 2016 that will be released later or released a year from now. And we expect to have periodic solicitations following that. So yes, there will be continuing solicitations throughout ABoVE.
Another question came in from Jim Kellner. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Another question came in from Jim Kellner. Can you elaborate on the Science Cloud? Are participants required to use it, and what kind of expertise is needed to make use of it? Will users need to write their own programs that run in the cloud, or are there staff to do this?
Okay, so that's a very good question. Can people hear me on this? The Science Cloud is actually designed so that you will log into the cloud as a virtual user from your home computer, and you will be able to import software in the language that you develop. So you won't have to write it in any specialty or specified software. It has the flexibility to be able to run off a variety of standard packages. And if Jim wants more information on that, he should contact Peter Griffith at the program office. So did I answer all the questions, or did I miss one?
I think you answered them all. Does anyone else have a question that they would like to put in the Q&A?
Hi, I think that I'm not connected to the WebEx actually, but I sent you an email. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, okay. Hi, Eric. Hey, in the page 17, actually, you said that there is a 5-meter panchromatic resolution, but actually it says 0.5, actually.
I meant 0.5. I misspoke if I said 5 meter.
Oh, okay.
It's a half-meter product.
Okay, yeah, good, okay.
I have another question from Ann Nolan. Where do we find a list of airborne sensors available for ABoVE field campaigns? Our proposed study area is over a national park. Can NASA TE help coordinate the permitting for park overflights?
Well, that's actually 2 questions. So we don't have a list yet of what airborne systems will be collecting data. It's likely that if you think about what NASA has, what they call, let me think of the right name here. We have facility instruments like the UAV SAR, like the Elvis LiDAR, and Avris. Those are likely to be flown and made available, but we're going to decide, but the science team is going to make a decision in terms of the priorities for what systems are needed, as well as where should they be flown. And then we are going to have a separate solicitation for these airborne collections in ROSES 2016. So one of the things that we're going to have to determine is basically when we start flying over different areas of Alaska, what permits are going to be required to fly over those, like the national parks.
This is Libby, also from NASA, and just wanted to say that if you're interested generally in what kind of airborne assets NASA has, you can go to airbornescience.nasa.gov, which lists the platforms and instruments, both facility instruments, which are the sort of standard generally available to the public, and then also other instruments that are under development at various centers, et cetera.
Thank you, Libby. Did I answer the question?
I think you did.
Okay.
Partly. I'm writing a separate question. Well, can you hear me right now?
Yes, I can.
Okay, Eric, hi, this is Ann Nolan. So since we don't know exactly the plans for the airborne field campaigns, how do we address this in our proposals coming out? So currently, we've kind of written, that the airborne measurements would be icing on the cake. It would be great. They're not required for us to answer the questions, but obviously we want to be as competitive as possible. So should we suggest the airborne measurements that are appropriate and then hope that they happen?
What you might do is say, of great interest to our project would be the collection of the following types of airborne data.
Okay.
Okay?
Yes. All right, thank you.
And with a discussion of how they would be helpful in addressing your goals and objectives.
Okay, good, thanks.
Hi, this is Simon. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So there's a lot of partners here, which is great. Do you anticipate, say, an annual meeting? It would be quite a big meeting, I think. Is that part of the plan?
Yes, we will have annual meetings, and one of the things Simon, we're currently discussing is setting up for people who we enter into partnerships with, is a programmatic oversight group that would basically the science team would report to and say, this is what we're planning and these are some of the programmatic implications of what's going on, and so that the programmatic group can coordinate things.
Broader than just the NG NASA funded stuff? Right,
exactly. Any organization we enter into a partnership, so we're talking to, for example, all those organizations we list would probably be involved in that oversight group.
Okay, good, thanks.
I have another question from Haruko Wainwright. This is Haruko from Berkeley National Lab, NGEE Arctic. I understand that the airborne mission will be in the next solicitation. Could we propose field campaigns to prepare for such airborne measurements, such as ground-based sensors? Or would that be of interest?
Yes, ground-based sensors that are tied into understanding and exploiting the airborne and scaling up questions certainly would be of interest.
Are there any phone-in participants who would like to ask a question? If so, please go off mute and you can ask your question. Any other questions from people who are participating in the WebEx?
Hello?
Hello.
Yes.
Hi, I have a quick technical question. There seems to be some confusion as to whether or not we include this pending proposal in our current and pending list. I think we're somewhere in the RFP.
Yes, I would not include this as a pending proposal.
Okay. All right, because usually we do. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Vincent Ambrosia asks, are you aware of the DoD Navy Northern Edge exercise that will involve the NASA, it's IKHANA, in 2017? there is initial talk on including a USFS multispectral sensor to piggyback and support wildfire observations and other terrestrial imaging potential.
That's the first I've heard of this. So if somebody could send me information on that, I can track it down here. Libby,
I'll
have you
do
heard
that, Eric.
Okay. Have you heard anything on that, Libby?
No, I haven't.
I'll send you a contact, Eric. This is Vince Ambrosia.
Okay, Vince. Thank you.
Thanks.
So this is Simon
Any more
again.
questions?
Yeah, this is Simon again. So the slide, I guess it's 11 on ecosystem services. Have you been able to put together, I mean, that's a pretty ambitious list. You know, is that end of the program well supplied with researchers, or, you know, are you still reaching out for more of the human impact?
You know, this is something that's going to build. We've asked for some proposals this time, or we're going to fund some proposals that start looking at the ecosystem services objectives. But we really sort of expect, if you go back to slide, what is it here?
I was looking at slide 11.
Yes, I saw that, but I was looking at slide, oh, I know
14.
what it is.
14, I think.
Yeah, slide 14, when we look at the timeline.
Yeah.
So basically, we expect the ecosystem services focus to pick up, you know, later on in the study.
More in the cross activity then?
Yeah,
okay. Yeah.
So we expect the, you know, the funding focus to basically, once the field campaign starts to wind down, then we'll increase the funding that's directed towards the ecosystem services focus.
Okay. Thanks.
I had one last question, Eric. I'm wondering how the ABoVE Science Cloud relates or integrates in some way to the NASA NEX, the next activity.
All right. So I'm still new at NASA. I'm learning all the different acronyms. Libby, do you know that answer to that question?
It's the NASA Earth Exchange. It's a data portal, and it has cloud storage and resources. And I would have thought that ABoVE would be part of that.
I think it is.
Well, so
yeah.
that exchange is, I think, the data portal that links up to the various data archive centers that we have. And so the ABoVE Science Cloud is really going to be a working environment, and it is not required necessarily that all ABoVE researchers use it. But what will be required of all ABoVE researchers is for them to make their data accessible and available, and strongly encourage them to use our DACs, our data active archive centers, to be able to do that. I also wanted to make a quick comment about the objectives, both in terms of what the objectives that Eric showed, both from the ecosystem dynamics and for ecosystem services, were identified by the science definition team as really important areas of research interest that were also tractable with or could be, gain some insight from using remotely sensed data. Since we're NASA, that's obviously a big focus for us. Now, the thing is that there's no way with $8 million a year that we could address all of those even if, say, we only focused on the ecosystem dynamics questions. And so for the person who asked, like, okay, well, for the ecosystem services, are you going to do all of those things? You know, probably not. We won't be able to do those. And what will happen is that, you know, these proposals are competitively selected, and while the program officer may, you know, have particular interest in promoting, say, or specifically looking for work that, good quality work that would address particular objectives, and, you know, in large part it also depends on how well the proposals do in peer review. And it may be that we just, you know, for one reason or another, don't get any good proposals that address infrastructure or something like that. So there's a little bit in which, you know, we can't really dictate everything that happens for the work that's going to be done.
But let me ask you this. For example, a given proposal in ecosystem dynamics has to have a leg in what is the next phase 2, ecosystem services. So in order to be peer review, you know, in good standing, is that right?
We're looking for those connections, you know, and certainly that'll be viewed positively, but it's not required for the first round of proposals if you're studying or proposing to study some key processes that need to be addressed. So it's not necessarily that everything has to be linked to ecosystem services, but we want people to demonstrate an awareness of the importance of the research to ecosystem services.
Okay, that's okay.
More questions in the Q&A box. Are there any more people that would like to raise a question over the voice line? Well, then, I'd really like to thank you, Eric, for a very good presentation. I'd like to thank all the participants for your tolerance at the start where we had a little bit of trouble with the muting button. We'll look into why that was. I also want to thank everybody for the great questions that were put to Eric, and Eric and Libby for fielding those so well. This has really been a very informative webinar, which, as I noted at the beginning, has been recorded and will be on the IARPC website, Collaboration's website, both on the public side and on the private side. There is a comment feature on the member side of the website.